afternoon, evening, morning, nighttime for everyone watching
Nighttime
this one.
if you just got out of the theater to see this movie.
Yeah, honestly, you could go to a 12 o'clock showing of this movie and
It would be dark by
it
the
would
time
be time for you to eat.
Yeah.
Time for you to go to bed. That's what it feels like. We're here. Me and James. Connor is in spirit today. Mainly because A, we didn't want to subject him to this, and B, I don't think he would
I
have
think
liked
this was mostly just for us.
Yeah, I don't think you actually would have liked this movie.
What
But
can you do?
it is what it is. So, Connor, if you're watching this on the sideline, we love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you in a couple days. But yeah, we're here to talk the man, the myth, the prodigal dad,
He's the grandfather.
the
at this point.
grandfather,
Yeah.
the great grandfather to some. Martin Scorsese's newest movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. I was immensely excited for this movie. It is a Martin Scorsese movie. It's a Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro movie.
Mhm.
And then I also read the book. So there were a lot of factors, for me at least, going into this movie about the hype. But what about for you, personal level?
Me personally,
What was your, where were you at?
hype was pretty low. I enjoy Martin Scorsese movies, but I'm not a big fan of him. I think Taxi Driver is great. Shutter Island is great. Casino, Goodfellas. But I don't really go out of my way to watch
Sure. There's
Scorsese
a lot of them.
movies.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. Knowing what I knew about this movie beforehand, which was the runtime, which mostly it was just that. I avoided trailers, I avoided spoilers and reviews. I was curious to see this movie because Scorsese had spent a lot of the last 2 years how should I say, giving his opinion on Marvel. And a lot of the film community was behind him for this. But it added extra weight to this film, in my opinion, whether he wanted that or not.
Yeah.
Because when you are one of the most prolific and recognizable directors working today, and you voice your negative opinions on the most prolific and financially successful franchise at the time, you set yourself up for extra scrutiny with your next project. I think a lot of people were expecting Killers of the Flower Moon to either outright be the death knell of Marvel movies and superhero films as we know them, if not in some way reference Marvel or kind of take a jab at them in the film itself. Once we got a sense of what it was going to be about, I don't think anybody should have expected that once reviews started coming in. But I was purely interested in seeing this just because anytime a filmmaker goes against superhero films without necessarily commenting on it, I feel like we get good results. Birdman was the last great one, I think, where it was literally, here's how you make a superhero film.
I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm going to Argentina for 6 years.
Yeah. So, that being said, it is a long film. It definitely lives up to the runtime for sure. I think we came out of the theater and we were both like, time for bed.
Yeah. Usually we record our pods
right away,
right after we get out of the theater. Not right after, but when we get home. And this one, I think I was like, just want to record in a couple days.
Yeah.
Let's wait till we're both free, and then we'll talk about it. But I think it actually, not only just like physical,
Mentally,
exhaustion, but mentally, just to be able to kind of just put find words to describe in like my thoughts and stuff like that. Which maybe that's how we should start reviewing our movies, giving ourselves at least like 36 hours.
I didn't know anything about the story beforehand. I didn't do any research. I didn't look at the book or any like Wikipedia reading beforehand. So by the end of the film, I was in that position where I was like, I'm speechless, not necessarily because I've been blown away, but because I just
Don't understand.
don't know how to form my thoughts at
Yeah.
this moment. We'll save it for the spoiler review.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about with this
Yes.
film. Absolutely.
I think I told you this when we left. There was one thing I said to you when we
Yeah.
left the theater is I can count on one hand how many times I've been left just speechless for like just
unlocked.
an idea what to even like
Think.
say or
Yeah.
think or like do, and this movie is one of those experiences.
I felt that same way. Yeah.
I haven't really felt like that leaving a theater since. I mean,
American Sniper.
it's been that's a good one, but also I think maybe like 1917 leaving that
Top
one.
Gun. Maverick.
No, that one I was speechless going into the theater. I was
course.
terrified. I was like, "Oh God, this better be good." But yeah, maybe something like 1917. I think is the last thing that really left an emotional impact on me. The
Yeah.
way that this movie did, which I'll just go ahead and say it right now, S tier,
Yeah.
all the way for me.
Yeah.
This movie is. We'll get to it in like 5 seconds, but it's magnificent.
Yeah. We'll get to it right now, actually.
What about for you?
For me, I'm still a little torn. I think
Yeah.
I still have some talking out to do about it, you know.
Let's discuss.
I had seen partially some comments about it not being on the sliding scale of Martin Scorsese. This was a little less on the Scorsese end
Yes.
of things. I knew that going into it. And honestly, up until maybe about the end of the film, I didn't even really think about his name being attached to
Yeah.
it. And so I think part of the issue I have had is I've tried to judge it in terms of where does it fit among Scorsese's movies. But at the same time, he is so adamant about this. I thought that we just almost lost the mic for a second there.
No, sorry. My F1
Might take off.
TV app just.
Got to reboot our computer in the middle of this. Sorry. Because, I mean, not to necessarily spoil the end, but it is very explicit how this film wants itself to be interpreted.
Yeah.
And taking that into the context with everything Scorsese has done, whereas at the same time, it doesn't even really feel like a Scorsese movie for 3 hours. I felt like I had, too much to juggle for a second there.
Yeah.
Where on the one hand, the story leaves a immense impact on you, irregardless of what you think about the Scorsese's directing or the acting or the writing. That being said, I was not necessarily impressed with the directing itself with Scorsese because it felt so cut and dry. Then again, we get to the end and it's, by the way, this film is cut and dry. That's how I wanted it to be.
I think he is evolving beyond this flashy director that he became in the 90s, with Casino, Goodfellas, even like into the 2000s with like Gangs of New York, The Departed, which I think we both said is like the most smart
amazing.
Scorsese movie. So I think, especially with this movie, with his last one, what is it called? It's with the Jesuit priests.
Silence.
Silence, thank you. And then with The Irishman as well, it's kind of him just becoming a more
clinical.
Yeah, he's becoming more streamlined, and he also is just. I feel like he's focusing more on emotion and not as much as like show per se, in terms of his directing style. And I think, to me, it's really fascinating just to see an 80-year-old director have that level of self-reflection and self critique, I guess, to be like, all right, I did that for 20, 30 years. I got
Reel
one
it back
more in
in.
me.
Yeah.
I'm reinventing myself. This is like, by the way, sports reference. This is like a Vince Carter turning into a 45% 3-point shooter his last 5 years in the league. And I think to me, I like it. I enjoy it. I mean, it gives, especially when you're dealing with, stories that have deep, just impact on American society. I think it's because I don't know if you make this in the same style as
It wouldn't work.
Goodfellas, it just doesn't.
It would almost feel insulting.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of it is he saw that because I was telling you before that this movie was originally conceived as a like a detective movie where Leo was the Tom White character, the FBI agent.
Jesse Plemons,
and it followed more of the investigation, but with talking with Leo, his screenwriters, and then the Osage Nation, who were a big part of the making of this movie, that he decided to focus more on the Osage and the white men who
surrounded
basically
them.
brutalized these people and terrorized these people for a long time. And he focused more on that to showcase their kind of evil. And I just don't know if a director does that in the middle of making this movie. And I think in a way it is beautiful that he would do something like that to sacrifice his original concept.
I think what's most impressive for me is that this movie is restraint without feeling like it has something to let out. It's very even keel about itself all the way through. Because you can, sometimes if you're holding back, you still have something you're holding back. But it feels like, and I think being able to, get his way with a 3-hour long runtime probably had something to do with it, where it feels like there's a steady pace throughout. Yes, it's a long movie. In my opinion, it only really starts to feel long towards the end when they're actually going on trial.
Yeah.
That was where I was like, this could have used some editing. But up until that point, it is so well paced that only the last hour felt like it took an hour, in my opinion.
And I think a lot of it too is because, well, at least me, I knew how it ended. I knew, how everything wrapped itself up. So I was kind of like, whoa. Like,
you know what?
we
I
have an
think is
hour
really
of this to
interesting.
get through. Like, that's quite a bit.
Not knowing how it ended from my perspective, he still gives you not outright hints. He explicitly shows you the people involved, but he never shows you them getting connected with it, how they got involved. And so you're left to just wonder how it's going to come together by the end. And when we do actual spoiler talk, I will spoil who it is. But for me, it's understandable, being a Martin Scorsese fan, why this would be an instant S tier, and I think most Scorsese fans have already agreed. That seems to be the opinion. I felt like this was at least a solid A, a big, bold A on it, but that was just because I felt a little taken aback by just how reserved I felt like it was to an extent. Across its entire runtime, it never explodes at any point. Like I would feel like I would expect.
It's a slow
Scorsese
burn.
to.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, I enjoy slow burns. I enjoy going on a 4-hour psychological journey where
he's talking about the Dark Knight.
I just am like, my body just leaves I just leave my body for 20 minutes post theater, and I just sit in, bed, and I'm like, what is the meaning of all this? But I mean, I can't fault anybody for being like, no, it's too long.
Yeah,
I understand. I understand. It's really hard to do that. But I will say this: if you're thinking about watching this movie, because it does come on Apple TV fairly soon, don't watch it on Apple TV. Watch it in the movie theater, because you just don't get experiences like this at home. And I don't like to be that guy who's like, oh, the theater is the best way to watch a movie, but like it is facts that when you sit in a theater for 3 hours and just cut off everything around you.
Yeah.
And it's just you with the speaker system, just every way you can see.
Barely anybody in the
Yes.
theater too. It
Yeah.
was like us and then two people
Yeah.
up at the front.
And then, like a big theater so you can see everything and you can see it grand. It just it enhances the experience immensely. And I don't know if I have that post leaving the theater experience at home where I'm like just don't know what to do with my life.
I've had it with a few movies from home.
But
I would like to imagine that this movie would be as attention grabbing in home as it is in theater, but without the luxury of pausing, without the luxury of, having your phone that you can pull out and just, distract yourself if you get bored. I feel like seeing it. This is a film that I would recommend seeing in theaters as well. But I would also like to imagine that if it can make you sit still for 3 hours in the theater, it should also do that at home as well. But also, if you don't have Apple TV, then go see it in theaters anyway.
Yeah, I wonder how
Since
many
not
people are going to
everyone
download
does.
Apple TV.
That's how many downloads there for The Irishman. That would probably be.
Well, The Irishman was Netflix.
That was right. It was Netflix. Yeah.
So, I don't know. Any other spoiler-free acting? You want to talk about acting in the spoiler-free part?
Let's save that because I think a lot of the acting,
There's a lot of moments we have to specifically talk about with the acting. But the acting is good.
It is good.
We can say that much. We'll tease that.
I have seen a lot of people saying that Lily Gladstone is at least going to get a good Best Actress nomination.
I would agree.
The character itself is very subdued, but she still has a lot of power in that performance as well, which is really cool. It would be hard to do something like that. It's like that performance in like any Ryan Gosling movie. It's the only time you can see like a basically silent character actually like have power in a scene.
Yeah, it's I've said this multiple times that screaming does not equate good acting.
It does not, no.
A la Marriage Story.
Yeah. And
the fact that scene is still like everybody's like, oh my god, this is a great scene. It's like it's not. Have you actually watched it?
There's more of
they
the
don't
movie,
talk
too.
to each other. They're not talking to each other.
Yeah.
They're talking to the audience in that scene. That scene is so bad. I hate that scene. I don't like that scene at all. It's so bad.
It's a Noah Baumbach movie. I don't watch those. I don't have anything to say. All right. Now we will talk about some slight spoilers.
Slight spoilers.
It is, of course, a historical event, so feel free to read up on that without even having to watch the film.
He didn't pull a Tarantino.
He didn't read.
Sharon Stone doesn't live at the end.
All right. So.
Or is it Sharon Tate? Sharon Tate.
Sharon Tate. That's correct. So, not knowing that it was the De Niro character and Leonardo DiCaprio all along, the moments in which the Leonardo DiCaprio character, Ernest,
Yeah.
when he would participate in crimes with his buddies, I had that inkling in the back of my head of that's going to be connected. He's going to be involved, but I didn't know how. And that was really what had kept my interest for those first 2 or so hours of the film. Once we got to the trial part and everything was revealed and then they go on trial, that's where it really slowed down for me, because then it was, we get to watch every character get interrogated one after the other. And there's literally 2 scenes, one after, like back to back, the exact same scene just happens twice. It's, hey, what do you know about this? I don't know anything. Well, bring this guy in. And then next scene, what do you know about killing this guy? I don't know anything. Well, bring this guy in. Just back to back. And I'm like, I get it we didn't need it.
Yeah.
You could cut out a lot.
There's a lot of
that
scenes. I
part
mean, there's a
towards the end.
specific scene about when one of the characters steals DiCaprio's car, and then he gets caught. There's a scene. It's a funny scene, but when DiCaprio and De Niro are arguing about it, and then they cut to the very next scene is, hey, so explain what happened. It's like we just watched
Yeah.
this 15-minute scene about this.
Yeah.
Like, come on, my guy.
There's
Basic editing.
Another scene where what is it? I still stand by the idea that characters should never turn around or go back in the story, and I know that it is probably part of the historical event that Ernst I don't know if his last name is Hale or not.
Here's Ernest
Burkhart, that he agreed to testify against his uncle and then went back on it and said, I won't do it. And then went back on that and said, never mind, I will do it. Just for the sake of storytelling, those are the kind of minor nuances where you can streamline that to just say he will just testify against his uncle. The whole going back and forth, I understand that it's there to show the negative effect it has on his family and his wife, Molly, but you would have gotten that anyway if you just streamlined it the first time. So really it's only towards the end of this film that I feel like we start getting scenes that could have just either been rewritten at the expense of historical accuracy or just outright removed and taken out. There's a scene when he changes his mind a second time and says, never mind, I'm going to testify against my uncle. He confronts his uncle in the jail cell for a good maybe 5-minute long conversation. They have these two back and forth. That whole scene could have been cut because you already had them in the courtroom earlier in the movie. You wouldn't have needed that. And it would have been the exact same as it ended. So just minor nitpicks like that for me, really. I was like, I get that for Scorsese to say that this is a personal movie for him. He wants to include everything that he possibly can. But at the same time, it's like, chop, chop, you know?
Yeah, and that's the problem you have when you adapt historical, like actual history, is what do you cut and who do you offend at when
At
you
the
do
expense
cut?
of that.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the most hardest things because, it takes like a 5-second Wikipedia search to be like, wait a minute, the actual Titans from Remember the Titans didn't, they blew everybody out by 50 points every game. That's not accurate, but it's like, does that matter though? Like nobody actually cares that they didn't have the actual box score,
Yeah.
So I think stuff like that is just like, it's such a fine
It's
line.
a fine line.
But to your point, in a 3.5-hour movie, that stuff does add up. It's
For sure.
just minor pacing things where it's like, okay, I get that we have, a 5-second scene to explain something, but it's like there's 20 of those, and that's 20 minutes right there that we could just use, especially because I feel like the actual investigation led by Tom White and the early FBI agents, really, really interesting stuff. And I think having, I don't know, maybe like a 10-minute thing. I mean, it shows like the undercover agents going in, and then it has like the way they piece stuff together. But, one of the agents is like, I just asked the guy off the street and he told me everything. It's like, that isn't actually what happened, but okay. I get why you did it, Martin.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I mean, if we're gonna make a 3.5-hour movie, can we throw like a 10-minute montage at least? You know?
Yeah. That's where you can do all your whip pans.
Yeah. That's what he does. That's what Martin. That's what made him big. Was all these montages throughout the 70s and 80s. So, to me, that's my only gripe, like major gripe,
With
at least with the
pacing.
movie.
Yeah.
Is just there's a lot of back and forth, like you said. But everything else,
Yeah.
pretty
Pretty spot on.
pretty spot on. Let's start with the acting. The three leads, they are, I mean, De Niro
Probably
is
the best. In
it's
this film, in my
insane.
opinion.
To be 80 something years old and to just still have it.
Yeah.
I mean, he embodies the devil in
Yeah.
this movie.
Yeah,
More than just because he's not even like, a lot of people, I think a lot of writers and directors, they have this problem when it comes to evil characters where it's, we need them to be big and they need to be bulky and they need to, have some kind of physical deformation and a weird voice. And it's like, he could be my uncle.
Yeah. Or it's even like, because the way that the plot is set up, we hear like his motivation is made extremely clear from like the first scene where we meet him, but everything is left unconnected until the end. And so we're only left to say we know what his motivation is, but we're not sure how he's necessarily controlling everybody.
Yeah.
Until really about, maybe 2.5 hours in, once it's kind of like, okay, then we explicitly see scenes where he's like, go get this guy killed over here.
Yeah.
Get it done. I'm going to be away. Mm-hmm. And we're like, okay, so what the heck, man?
Yeah, I mean, he just has a stage presence to him where you're just like, this
Yeah.
guy is not to be trusted
Yeah.
from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of,
He's one of those characters you meet. Sometimes you meet characters and we just know those archetypes where we're like, we know this guy isn't to be trusted and we know we don't like him.
we can't point the finger why.
Yeah.
No, we can't place why.
And
Yeah.
the way that and this is also, I think, in my opinion, a really good example, this movie, of how to write characters who aren't smart,
Yeah.
but are still like not necessarily frustrating to watch. I know we just talked about horror movies for the last month. And you get that a lot in horror movies where it's like, okay, character, you're a person in this situation with these resources. What decision are you going to make?
Yeah.
And in the horror movies, it's always
A wrong
the worst one. And I feel like
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a good example of somebody who is put in a situation where he is purposely being fed the wrong resources and decisions to make, but because he's an idiot, he just doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
And so there's this almost like hapless quality to him that allows us to still empathize with him as he's more or less the main character, but still allows us to, by the end of the film, be like, yeah, you get what you deserve. And I'll let you, before I say what I was going to say.
Well, I was going to say, and that's what makes this movie so interesting, at least in scopes, or at least in like comparison to Martin movies, where it's all of his protagonists, which we can say Hale and Burkhart are protagonists in this movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of his protagonists are not nice guys, but they're A, smart, and B, they are cool. And Hale and Burkhart are not smart or cool. They're just brutal forces that just have one desire, and that is to have money.
Mm-hmm.
And to see that in comparison to like A Wolf of Wall Street with Jordan Belfort is like such a stark difference.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like this guy is just reinventing himself on the go. And it's, I mean, that's why it's impressive to me.
Now, I think, in my opinion, and I know that I might be jumping ahead a little bit, acting, fantastic. The ending of this film, the actual ending of this movie, was absolutely the best possible way that this movie
Oh, it
was.
is
In a way where, like,
so beautiful.
if you told me, write this movie, even if I could do it, I could not have thought of that ending.
No.
The radio play, I was like, yeah, this is like, when people say Scorsese is a genius, you point to a scene like this. It is the best way to close out and finish those characters, because it's such a, the reason it works for me, at least the reason it worked for me, is because you want everyone to get their like comeuppance, but at the same time, you can't do it at the expense of still acknowledging the era, which was a point in time where nobody cared about the Native Americans.
Yeah.
And it is made explicitly clear throughout this film that nobody cares about the Native Americans. So to put it in this context of, we're going to end this film with this whole thing being entertainment, as I die halfway through saying that sentence. This whole story was entertainment at the time. By the way, hi, I'm Martin Scorsese. You're watching a movie right now. Entertainment. I'm like, that is exactly how you should have ended this film, and I didn't even see that coming. It was so well done. And it's good too, because when Scorsese actually comes out and he reads the actual obituary of Molly Burkhart, it's like you can't get any more cut and dry than that. The way that he just says, you are not going to misinterpret this movie of mine. I'm going to make sure that you know exactly what I was trying to do here.
And there's so many layers of nuance within that scene too, because it's it's this wonderful director who we have all grown up watching his movies, or at least have watched people who made movies influenced by his movies, right?
Yeah.
So he is like
the
literal godfather to American movies. So there's that, a renowned figure who's, he's a renowned figure in American cinema. And then it's the hype behind this movie. It's a story about the Native Americans during an era where, we've quite, to be blunt, we don't care about Native Americans even now,
Yeah. Look at the way that books are being completely rewritten.
Yeah.
All that part of history is being removed.
I didn't even know, I grew up now thinking Native Americans were just people. I didn't think there was any layer of organization or culture to their societies growing up. They were just literal people who just I'm on horse following a buffalo.
Yeah.
And it's no, these were actual, they had institutions within their culture. And I'm still learning to this day stuff.
That's Texas education coming through you right now.
It's actually 4 different states education.
Yeah, I bet. That's probably 48 different states.
I grew up, I think I went to school in 3 different states, and they all taught that.
Hey, Arizona had me covered. Let's go.
But so there's that, him showing and telling us at the end of the day, you may sit here and you may cry, but you also don't care. Because the literal last line of the obituary is, there were no mentions of the murder. And it's that's a pretty important piece of information that I feel should be in an obituary about her.
Yeah.
Well, at least that's how I interpret it, right? Where it's at the end of the day, nobody cared about you. Nobody cared that you were terrorized for however many years this went on. I think it was 6, 7, I don't know.
The way that I had interpreted it was I am Martin Scorsese, the guy who makes violent, debauchery-filled movies of excess. And I made a violent movie because these were never mentioned. And therefore, if you're going to criticize me for my violence, yada, 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 we're desensitized, et cetera, et cetera. Understand that this is why I do it, because there's still history here to be told that previously wasn't told. And truth be told, Scorsese, for as large as his name is, how many people would never have read this book if it wasn't for the fact that he had adapted it in this movie? Not to say that he deserves to be called the white savior of this situation, but just to say that there is an extent to which I feel like I had interpreted that line as all the criticisms that you might throw at movies only serve to show that you just don't understand what movies aim to do anyway.
Yeah.
And you're going to go after Marvel and say those are violent movies where they never show the death of characters because it doesn't mean anything, or they want PG-13 ratings. This is what we're supposed to be doing, actually. This is, why we would even bother showing violence in the first place. That's at least how I had interpreted it.
Yeah, because the violence is, I mean, it,
Very
like,
muted and minimal.
it's, yeah, but it's also like when it happens, you just feel like I didn't feel pity. I just felt pathetic watching this, where I was just like, you guys are literal, like I can't even look at you. Like, I can't believe people like this existed in the world.
Yeah.
Like, it's,
Yeah.
like a great example, like something else that made me feel like that was I watched this movie called Conspiracy, which was about the conference with that basically someone peels out in our parking lot.
Doing donuts over in the room.
They were watching NASCAR, I guess. But it's a movie about the conference that basically formed the final solution with the Nazis, with the Nazis' final solution to the Jewish problem. And just watching it the whole time, I was like, how do people like this, like, how can people be so demented and so far gone in real life? You know, it's one thing to make a character and make him twisted and all messed up like Hannibal Lecter or whatever, and at that point it's like, yeah, whatever. But when you're watching real life people do stuff like this, you're just like, man, like how? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's why the violence in this movie, even though it's far and few between, which is extremely off-brand for a Martin Scorsese movie,
It still means something.
it means something, yeah. And I think that goes more into our discussion we had with Connor, where context does matter, and I don't think we are becoming desensitized. I don't know if any other director could have made this movie the way it's made and the message that he was trying to be portrayed. Because I feel like it has to be him. Mostly I say that just because of the name value, and because no other director, I think, has that level of self-realization to say, hey, I'm going to end the movie with me reading the obituary so I can leave a profounding effect, instead of, you know, a simplistic cut to, you know, they're leading Leonardo DiCaprio into the cell and the cell closes and it's like, all right, that's it. That's the movie. It's like, we don't get that. We don't get that anymore. I don't know if another director
I don't
has
know
that
if another director could
in
have
them.
done that ending.
Yeah.
In terms of adapting the book itself, that would be up for grabs for me. But I do think that the ending of this film is something that only somebody with Scorsese's kind of, you know, like you said, his reflection and his thought process.
Because the ending is what makes this movie.
Does the book just end with like...
It ends with Tom White dying in jail. There's like a whole... okay, so the actual ending is the reporter who wrote the book.
So like the radio play is movie exclusive, basically, was what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was just Scorsese.
The ending is the author
Yeah.
like just detailing his experience going through the Osage, which is also an ending that is just... I mean, he literally goes to a museum and is like, hey, do you know these people? And he like lists a couple victims, and they're like, oh yeah, that the actual museum curator goes, yeah, that's my great grandfather.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, like to him it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And that's when he would realize the weight of what he was actually
There's
doing.
only so many years between generations.
Yeah. It was like a 60-year-old lady. I think it was no, I don't even think she was that old either. I think she was like 40 or something. It's like, this, like, that's my great grandfather. It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Shout out to Eric Roth as well. I know we've been talking about the writing,
Yeah.
but he's been holding it down too.
Very good. Very good.
His extremely long career. Chances
Music?
are the radio play was his idea anyway.
How do you feel about the music?
The soundtrack in this film really threw me off a little bit.
No Jay-Z. No. Thank you, Martin, for no Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Finally graduated.
It was so this is a musician who he has worked with before.
Who just recently passed away.
Robbie Robertson.
Yeah.
And the instrumental country music, I felt, honestly, so this film approaches its music in two kind of ways. There's the actual soundtrack, which is a lot of instrumental country music, which to some scenes kind of felt off or out of place, but there is a lot of diegetic music that is period appropriate. And that to me was the most effective part of the soundtracks, where all the words you hear the tape crackle and the record scratches on it. That stuff I thought was the coolest part of the soundtrack. Yeah. The actual music itself, I felt like there was just kind of two songs that just played for all the intense scenes, in my opinion. No offense to Robbie Robertson, but nevertheless, that's just my opinions on the soundtrack. Throwing that out there. Now that all that's out of the way, is this, other than maybe Oppenheimer, possibly Barbie, is this the best contender for Best Picture?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. Just because we don't know how many years we're gonna have Scorsese left, so we need to. I mean, I'm looking at it through the view of the Academy, not through my view, my personal view. I think the Academy's going to say we need to champion this man because we don't know how many years we have left. I think for a lot of awards, I think it's going to be between this and Oppenheimer. We'll see what happens with if we get the good Ridley Scott or the bad Ridley Scott next month with Napoleon.
Yeah, but I think just judging by the trailer, I think best costume is off the table. I think Napoleon is going to have that covered.
Probably.
Yeah, best
or
set
Barbie.
design. Barbie too, yeah, that would also be up there.
I think as fun as Barbie is, and it probably will get a best director, best picture is the 10. It'll probably get a best picture nom just because it made $1 gajillion at the box office, and it's a movie that came out in 2023. So it'll probably get a nomination for that. Maybe, I don't know.
Scorsese would get best director.
Yes,
best adapted screenplay.
Yes,
I think this would be a shoe-in for this category.
I think it would win it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Acting. I mean, I would throw De Niro and
Leo
DiCaprio in there. Yeah, 100%. I think they're both. It's so much fun seeing Leonardo DiCaprio with someone who you could make a legitimate case is a better actor than him because you see in scenes him elevate his game to match
De Niro.
We haven't seen it since, I don't know, maybe The Departed when he was with Nicholson.
Yeah.
Where he was like, I'm going the umpteenth degree because that is what my co-star demands of me.
Yeah.
So seeing DiCaprio do that is like, it's cool.
Yeah.
And it's also cool because he's not playing this smart, sophisticated character. He's an idiot.
Yeah.
He's an idiot in this movie. Like, you know how to read? Read. What do you mean I know how to read? You know how to read books. You know how to read? Yeah, like books. Yeah, I can read. It's pretty fun. But yeah, I think it's gonna be those two for sure nominated. I mean, Lily Gladstone, I think definitely. She's really good. The scene where there's a lot of scenes, but the scene specifically where a lot of her sister gets bombed, and then DiCaprio comes downstairs and she just lets out that like scream. I'm like, Jesus.
For me, it's a lot of the sickness. I think.
Yes, that too.
Looking sick, having to act being sick, the sweat and the shivers, and I'm just like, this is too real. To a degree. You didn't actually give her diabetes for this movie, did you?
Yeah, she plays the sickness very well, and also the grief.
Yeah,
and also just like terror, like her, because you read the book and you're like, I mean, she lived in terror for years, not knowing when she was gonna, because she knew she was next, she just didn't know when it was coming.
Yeah.
And you know the way she just like was very reserved, and her eyes were always darting around, and she's like very timid towards the end of the movie. It's like, that's good acting right there, man. That's good acting. So yeah, I think then she'll be in too.
Absolutely. Obviously, it will get nominated for just about every category that exists. I'll be honest.
Probably.
I think that there's a little too reservedness in the editing and cinematography, and
I would agree.
stuff like that. I don't think it would get nominated, but I don't know if it is a shoe in the win necessarily. I absolutely have no doubt DiCaprio and De Niro will both get Best Actor nominations, and I have no doubt they will both lose to Cillian Murphy. So
they're gonna pull a what movie also had 2 people directed and lost? I feel like that happens very often.
yeah,
Where yeah,
multiple people get nominated. I think I remember a fact about like Gone with the Wind had like 4 actors nominated for Best Picture, and the 5th guy from a different movie won.
just kept splitting the vote.
Yeah.
That's probably what's gonna happen. It'll be funny if they release like a ballot and it's like Cillian Murphy had no first place votes, but he just had all the second place votes.
That would be funny. It would be a real Carlos Sainz. Best Picture.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this movie's good.
This movie definitely takes a toll out of you. So if you're willing to put up with that for 3 hours, it is absolutely worth it, in my opinion. I still stand by that A. It's definitely a slow burn, but I still think it's worth it at the end, in my opinion. That's about all that I have to say.
Favorite scenes?
Favorite scenes?
The most beautiful scene to me was the mom dying.
Oh yeah, that was really well done.
That was so well done.
Mm-hmm.
Just no sound. Just I think it's literally just nature and the wind. It's going through the grass and trees.
Same with the closing credits too. I like that was
the
just the
closing
wind
credits
itself.
with the slow push out, whatever that's called. Sorry to my DP friends for not knowing terms.
For some reason, when you said best scene, I kept trying to think of individual shots, but the radio play would be my favorite scene.
Yeah,
the entire ending of the film.
It's a really, really touching scene.
Absolutely. Go see this movie. It's good.
Go see this movie.
Support independent filmmaking.
Yeah, the most independent filmmaker with a $250 million budget. Making a movie for the largest
business.
company, largest company since the East Virginia Charter Company.
Look, at this point in history, if it's not Marvel, it's independent. Basically,
I hate how true that is.
It's not Marvel or Warner Brothers. It's independent filmmaking.
Anyways, we're out, guys. We'll see you guys next week for another something
riveting.
We'll find something.
Yeah.